everyone, and welcome to Candidly Unapologetic with Therapist Jen. This is your 15 minutes of candid discussion about mental health that will invite you to question traditional treatment practices and always leave you with a holistic nugget to better your own mental health. So if you are still listening, we are on our second episode here. So this is a big deal for me. In today's episode, we are going to discuss moral conflict and what that is. So the question we're going to start with is, have you ever gone to a very extreme measure to get your needs met that conflicts with others' values or that others judged you for? So I'm going to start this conversation with a little bit of history from my previous employer. When I first started working in the world of corrections as a therapist, I very quickly discovered that counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists are just really big assholes. And so anyone listening who falls under that category, okay, yes, I'm one of them. And I think you also can probably appreciate the fact that it is nothing but ego, ego, ego. When I first started working for the Department of Health Services, the treatment modalities that happened within the facility always included a wraparound team. And that team got together every single week. And there was a psychiatrist, typically a psychologist or a counselor. Once in a great while, there was a medical doctor. We would have a recreation therapist, a social worker, some type of a unit manager. We would all get together with the inmate that we were working with, and we would talk about what was to be a holistic wraparound type treatment plan where everybody had a say at the table because everybody mattered. And that's usually not how it ended up. And what I found is that sometimes within the world of either the medical doctors or the psychologists, some of the counselors, and today we're going to talk about a psychiatrist because that's where my mind is going back to. They were assholes, and they spent a lot of time walking around, peacocking, and really just feeling as though their voice was the most important for the treatment plan for whatever inmate we are working with. So when I started in this world about 13 years ago or so for the Department of Health Services, I realized that I had to quickly adapt. And I'm going to use the word adapt a lot here because for me, that's what it was about. I had to adapt to the peacocking. I had to adapt to the personalities. And it did not take me very long to discover that in order to have my voice be heard, I would have to stroke some egos. And it was not like Clarence Cotta, ooh, shit, stroking. It wasn't like that. It was a different kind of stroke by which I had to individually figure out every person's needs and then tweak how I spoke with them, put some on this big platform that they needed to be put on, and for some, as I will tell you, do some other things by which I had to use my ass as an asset to make shit happen. And let's talk about what that means. So there was a particular psychiatrist that I work with repeatedly, and he was the psychiatrist that was assigned to the unit that I worked on. And this gentleman would come to our treatment plan meetings, and he was the shit. No one could tell him any other way. He would interrupt people. He wouldn't make eye contact. I felt he was extremely disrespectful, especially to the inmates, right? They were patients, very mentally ill individuals. And that psychiatrist had a seat at that table, had a role at that table, and his role was to prescribe medications to assist with this individual who struggled greatly with some pretty significant self-harming behavior. And I learned very quickly that when I was at the table with that psychiatrist, I did not have a voice. And Therapist Jen's training and ideas of using dialectical behavior therapy and some very intense treatment, cognitive behavioral treatment interventions with this individual was not going to fly with him. And with the psychiatrist, it was all about medications. And there was nothing else that I was going to say. And in fact, when I would say it, he'd cut me off. When the inmate would talk about the therapy that he was doing with me, the psychiatrist would cut me off. And so what did I do? I learned to adapt. And what that looked like for me was coming to realize that watching the nonverbals of the psychiatrist, learning a little bit more about him, I found that he was a pretty big pervert. And something that I got traction with the psychiatrist was that if I would walk down the hall a certain way and look at him and, use my ass as an asset, I got traction with him. If I would talk him up and go in his office and tell him about how his psychiatric interventions were just the best thing, I would get traction with him. And when I'd walk out of the office and I'd turn around and look, damn straight, he was looking at my ass. Okay, now before you start judging me, I need you to listen to this because we're going to wrap this all back around, right? Okay. Remember our question. Have you gone to extreme measures to get needs met and you think others were judging you for it? Okay, that's where we started. So I know y'all are like, oh my God, she's something. She ain't a therapist. Well, I am. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why this worked. Okay. So before I knew it, at the table, I had a voice. After telling him multiple times that he was just the best thing since sliced bread, that his psychiatric interventions were cutting edge and freaking phenomenal, and showing my asset to him very strategically, he started to listen to me. Okay? And I'm not proud, but I'm not proud at the same time of this. He would listen to me. And what ended up happening is he then would listen to my client. I was starting to notice in the meetings, he'd let the client speak. He would let others at the table speak. I was noticing in his documentation that he did along the way that it went from not allotting discussion about the DBT therapy that I was doing to a note, a line, 1 or 2 lines going in there about the therapeutic intervention and that it must be making headway because over time, this patient was harming himself less. Over time, his subjective discussion about symptomology and how strong these emotions were that he had and thoughts to hurt himself and kill himself, they were decreasing over time. Okay. And so all of a sudden, I had a voice at the table. Now, more importantly than me, my patient had a voice at the table. My patient had a voice in his own treatment, which is something that when we started, my patient did not have. Now, I'm not saying there aren't other external influences that led to this psychiatrist all of a sudden being willing to look at other alternate interventions other than, the psychopharmacology world. However, this was a piece of the pie, and I know it was a piece of the pie. And I did this all in the name of my client. Now, the piece I want to talk about today is why this did not bother me. It bothered others a lot. And I know this because over time, I ended up having some clinicians that came to me and said, Jen, I see kind of what you're doing and it's wrong. I can see the way that you talk to him, the way you look at him, and even the way you walk away from him. And it's not right. Okay, so I want to challenge this thought, because it didn't bother me, and I was using my ass as an asset. So assumptions that are made by people were that I definitely was the skanky little person. There was probably times where people questioned my competency as well because they saw me doing something different in the beginning that wasn't me talking about this therapeutic intervention. But I kept going back to the fact that this is about my client. And right now in this moment, and for quite some time, this client didn't have a voice and I didn't have a voice. And how could I get a voice for that client? Because it's really all about them. And that is what I valued, was the client. So traditional cognitive behavior therapy is going to teach you that judgments are coming from, there's thoughts that we have, right? There's emotions that are paired with them, and it's going to lead to an action, right? So let's walk through this. Those sitting at the table were, here's Jen. Look at her bending over. She looks like a slut. What kind of clinician is that? They were probably feeling disgust, right? And led to action. For some, it was them actually telling me the judgments that they had of me. For some, the action was keeping it internal, but the action was, she's disgusting. Perhaps they were saying, she's look at her undoing hundreds of years of women trying to free themselves from all this sexist bullshit, right? And look what she's doing. Okay, well, so I want to go deeper with this today, because today we're going to talk about morals and values. And I want you to ask yourself if there are things you have ever done in your life that other people judged you for, And you maybe found yourself starting to question who you are and judge yourself as well. And yet you continue to go back to, but I don't feel like what I did was wrong. So morals are truly a deeper belief, right? Morals are typically something that comes from an external influence that we've got and truly becomes internalized, right? You may have heard of the idea of a moral compass, okay? And that's essentially that voice inside of ourselves that helps dictate our right and wrong of the world. So simply, very simplistic terms, our morals are the rules of life that we develop that come externally, right? So don't harm people. Be kind to your parents. It's not okay to drink and drive. Don't steal. Don't lie, okay? Now, morals can change over time and over life as your external influences start to change. Now, that's different from our value system. Values are characteristics that we have about ourselves that come from within. They're deep inside of us. They're intrinsic motivators, okay? Internal, not external. They're the things inside of ourselves that typically are pretty innate. And some of us are born with these. There's some strong genetic lineages that come from this. And essentially, there are motivators that stick with us usually throughout life. So honesty, integrity, creativity, okay? Oftentimes through life, our moral compass can change, but our values stay pretty stagnant. We've got them there. So today's nugget, we always have a nugget in this podcast, right? I want everyone to think about the judgments that you've got and also judgments that others have had of you for your actions, okay, that have led to either you judging other people or other people judging you, all right? And I want you to ask yourself, do you have a good understanding of your own morals and what your values are? I am asking you that because it's important when looking at actions, why we do what we do, and really truly figuring out the why behind the what. So, for example, I am very different than, likely my moral compass was very different than some of those others that were sitting in that room and some of my other colleagues that came up to me and were like, Jen, what the hell are you doing? All right. So at the end of the day, my moral compass did not believe that what I was doing was wrong, because that for me wasn't something that I saw as wrong, because my value system was telling me I value what is just and what is right. I value being inquisitive. I value being humble. I value looking at alternate options. And that goes back to my larger value of helping people. And so within this whole dynamic were this handful of values that I had that did not conflict with my moral compass at all, because what I was doing to me was not wrong. For me, my moral compass is telling me that it is wrong to not give somebody a fair shake at looking at all the options and the things that they need in life. And it's not right to let someone's ego trump all the other things that could be good for this person. Now, we could debate back and forth on this all day long about where that truly came from for me and whether or not that was the right stance to take and all that time. But what I'm talking about today is, at the end of the day, my moral compass believed and truly knew that what I was doing was not malicious. I was coming from a great space. And perhaps the person that you're judging is just using her ass as an asset, and you just don't know it. And it's because her moral compass differs from yours. And what she values, believe it or not, you guys may value that same thing, and you just don't know it. So the takeaway message for this, and the nugget that I want you to think about, is judgments, and how judgments really truly can impair our view of the world if we don't step back and give it a moment and go, what do I believe in? What's right or wrong? And what do I value? And perhaps that person across from me who I'm judging so terribly, maybe their moral compass and their value system is in a different space. Or perhaps we are very similar and we just show it in a very different way. So My quote that I want to leave everybody with too is, when you know your why, your what makes more sense as you are moving toward your purpose. So I want all of y'all to take this dose today of candid, empowered energy and use it to make things happen.